Hello and welcome to the Life After Diets podcast. I'm Sarah Dosanjh, psychotherapist and author of the book I Can't Stop Eating.
And I'm Stefanie Michele, binge recovery health coach. If you feel out of control around food, we get it because we've been there.
Thank you for joining our conversations about how to make peace with food and feel more comfortable in our bodies.
Now on to this week's episode.
Do you think people will look at the title of this episode and be a bit confused?
What is the title of this episode?
I think it's going to be something along the lines of, but is the anti-diet identity?
Yeah. Is it a helpful identity? I think it's intriguing. Maybe we should clarify what we mean.
Yes, because our podcast is called Life After Diets. We are not pro-dieting here at all. Correct?
Correct. But we're also not anti as an identity.
Yes.
We're not called the Anti-Diet Podcast.
No. You used to identify as anti-diet,
Yes, I
didn't
did.
you? So I'd be
I
intrigued
absolutely
to
did.
hear your journey, because I don't know that I ever went right into anti-diet. I call myself non-diet now, which I think you do as well. But what was your shift there and why?
Well, I'm going to read to you something that I posted yesterday on Threads. Are you on Threads?
I've logged on and then I've really overthought my first thread and I still haven't done it.
So yesterday, I wrote this. It seems to me that, except I wrote, it seems to be. If anyone caught that, it's a mistake. It seems to me that any form of healing or evolution involves a period of overcorrecting. There is a pendulum swing to the opposite side in order to reestablish a center. I see this on the micro level with personal growth and the macro level with social change. I think this overcorrection is necessary, and I think it's not the final phase of change. So for me, the overcorrection was a vehement, passionate swing into anti-diet as a full-on rejection of dieting and all of the ways that dieting had hurt me and oppressed me. And I needed it. Like, I really needed that overcorrection because it kind of gave me an outlet for my passion, and it gave me a place to start identifying with what that meant and the people that were also seeing that. So it gave me a community sense of like, yes, if you're anti-diet, these are the values that inherently you espouse. And I just wanted to talk about it all the time and blah, blah, blah. And I think that I needed that. And then I stopped needing that like so much, because it almost felt like, okay, for a period of time, that's very helpful. It helps you establish new values, and it helps you understand what you're rejecting. It helps you be able to find other people like you. But then I started to feel bored of it. Like I don't need that kind of passion anymore. It's just my values are now my values, and I don't need to prove them anymore. I don't need to shout them from the rooftops anymore. I don't need to battle differing opinions anymore. I guess it comes from, in part, a security with what I think and feel, and also there can be a lot of intolerance in any community that's on an extreme for any other thought process, or that things work for other people. Some other things work for other people, and also the repetition of the same things, almost like parroting quotes and ideas, just felt like it was almost lacking independent thought, which I didn't feel like it was in the beginning. So I've gotten away from identifying as anti-diet, or even just identifying at all. There's something I think that I just don't need that anymore. And yeah.
Okay. So have your values changed from that? Because you said that you took on the values of the anti-diet movement.
Mm-hmm.
I say anti, you say anti. Anti-diet movement. You took on those values, and now that you're no longer identifying as staunchly as like, this is my identity in this camp, I am anti-diet.
Yeah.
Have your values changed? And if
no,
not, why would you then not continue to identify as anti-diet?
Well, generally, no, the values haven't changed. However, there's more shades of gray that I recognize. For example, can I read something else?
Of course you can.
So everyone knows.
Steph, you are co-host of this podcast. You can do whatever you want.
Okay, fine. I have this screenshotted because I was going to share this with. I knew I'd find a place for it. So anyone who knows me and has listened to the podcast knows that this began for me when I read The Fuck It Diet by Caroline Dooner. Now, Caroline Dooner has since departed from, like, she talks about all sorts of other things. Her account is not even resembling The Fuck It Diet anymore. I still follow her because I can never unfollow her because I feel like she saved my life. So to that, I just feel like I owe her, I have a loyalty to her. She doesn't even talk about this anymore. But the other day in her stories, she did speak to this a little bit, and I screenshotted it because I think she put it really well. She wrote, I used to pretty much believe and preach that any thought about weight loss or any focus on weight loss was always disordered and always was going to lead to a backlash. I don't believe that anymore. You know why? Oh, and then she gets political. She's like, because I'm not in a cult anymore. And because my own experience has changed and normalized so much over the past 11 years since I first started healing. However, I do think we live in a culture that has normalized an unhealthy obsession with weight, so it's all nuanced. A healed, non-disordered person can tweak their lifestyle and lose some weight in a non-disordered way. I'm going to hold on if you're getting upset. I still think that intentional weight loss that is obsessive, overly restrictive, or attempting to reach a weight below your body's preferred and unique set point will backfire and is bad for your health. The goal is to heal. The goal is to stop being obsessed with dieting. Then the goal is to stop being obsessed with not dieting too. And that just kind of sums it up for me. And I'm almost, she's 11 years in, I'm 4, so, but there is something that happens where it's like you almost start to become obsessed with not dieting. And it still feels like you're clinging to some kind of identity, or you're identifying with something, which is essentially what got me into trouble in the first place. So there is something about a certain amount of time spent in that place to overcorrect, and then a release of that in order to truly evolve. Because the more that I stay upset about, you know what I mean? Like there's some kind of attachment to it when I'm getting mad at people for trying to lose weight, or saying that all weight loss is bad and wrong. And I still do think that, like, I think I'm at my weight set point range. And if I were to try to lose weight, it would backfire. But I don't believe that that's necessarily true for everybody. I've had clients who have overshot, in recovery, and they have lost weight and it hasn't backfired on them. But there's other people for whom it would. And I just feel like you cannot call everybody a monolith as far as what their body is going to do and how it's going to rebel. There's absolutely a risk if you're not fully healed to, like, the psychology will rebel. Absolutely. 100% I stand by this. And I think it's so important to leave that at the door when you're doing this work. And then eventually there might be, there's a whole branches of different ways that could go depending on who you are, what your history is, what your biology is, your genetic blueprint, and the way that your mind has flexibility or not. Like you just can't call it all like once you diet, you can never ever talk about weight loss again, or you're going to mentally restrict. It's just not always the case. And there's too many layers to be talking about it in such a way that's very black and white.
The bit that really strikes me from what you just read there that Caroline Dooner put on her stories is where she says, this is my issue, I think, with the very staunch, inflexible anti-diet mentality, is that idea that any thoughts or attempts to lose weight is disordered, because that's
right.
what happens, right? When you identify as that. So my brother, his weight will fluctuate a bit, and sometimes when his weight's a bit higher, he'll say, oh, like I'm doing this, I'm doing that because I want to drop a few pounds, and I really don't think it's disordered for him.
Right.
That's not how it does take a bit of effort. He doesn't always find it really easy. Some people might find it really simple to just, I'm just going to tweak a few things here and my weight goes a bit lower. But it's that, and I think there's something as well, like, and the danger of us talking about this is people go, oh, great.
I know.
Great. Like, oh, well, I've been listening to Sarah and Stef for a while and I trust what they say. So they're now saying that it is possible, as long as I do it the right way,
right,
then it is possible. And that it's the lack of independent thought, which is why we're talking about it, as you take on this identity. And that, of course, sometimes you need it when you're trying to change your mind, when you're trying to get away from something that has actively harmed you. We need others who, not always, but often we benefit from having others who are also fostering or having this new belief system. It's quite hard to change our mind when everything around us is making a different noise. But you see it in people who are getting so angry and judgmental at anybody else who is losing weight or being straight away in there to label everything disordered is part of the problem. And I can't remember if I've said this on the podcast before, but one of the analogies that I bring in is Mother Teresa. Have I talked to you about this before?
I don't think so.
So no one would say Mother Teresa was pro-war or pro-violence, right?
Right.
But there's this story about Mother Teresa that she was invited onto this anti-war rally, and she refused to go and march in this rally. And she said, when you do a pro-peace rally, then I'll be there. So for me, my aversion as such to this anti-diet label, putting this on, is it's about being anti the thing I don't like. And I don't like dieting. I think it's problematic, probably for most people.
Yeah, right.
I don't like it. I'm not saying people need to go and do this. I would prefer you didn't. But and I understand that it may not be as harmful as other people. So I would think of it, if we're going to take the Mother Teresa analogy, then what we're looking at is pro-peace. Let's take on not even identity, but like let's take on the mindset of what it is we're trying to create, rather than the thing that we hate. Let's keep shouting about the thing that we hate.
Yeah.
Which again, gonna toot our own horn here, but we're life after diets, right? We're talking about, okay, like we don't agree with dieting, but now what? Let's focus on what it is we are trying to do. Yes. And that independent thought and figuring out your own body and what's okay for you and what's not okay for you, and respecting that, as opposed to like hoping that someone else is going to tell you what is and what isn't okay for you to do. I mean, listen to the words. There's a lot of wisdom out there from people who've had these experiences, and then we need to find out for ourselves. It's the whole readiness thing that we've spoken about before. You get to the readiness when you truly realize in your core, my goodness, like I can't do this. I got to a point where it was simply, I cannot. Anytime I focus on intentionally trying to lose weight, I eat more. That is like, and that's still the fact for me today.
I agree. Me too.
Whether that would ever change, who knows? It doesn't matter, because I'm fortunate enough to have enough straight size privilege that my body size doesn't stop me from doing the things that I want to do. And also it's important to acknowledge that, I think, anytime anybody's talking about dieting being a problem.
Yes. And I would say for about 90% of the people I work with, dieting itself is harmful. Like, I don't think this conversation isn't relevant to about 10% of the people. I mean, it is relevant in other ways, but I want to be clear that I'm not saying that like, I think there's room for weight loss after you stop dieting. No, I actually think for most of us, there isn't. When you've got the history of this, any focus on it will, but there's a small percentage of people where that it's not disordered to think about it. And that even the thought about it shouldn't feel scary, that there should be some neutrality in the freedom. Look, if I were to think about weight loss for myself, I feel free to think about it. I don't feel afraid to say, let's say I felt really compelled to lose weight, which it doesn't matter though, because for me, it's like, I know I respect my body's position on that. And I think that I'm at a place where my body is like, this is where we are. And this is, I'm not willing to go any lower. And so I know that. And so, but I'm not afraid to have the conversation in my head, because I'm afraid that if I think about it for a minute, that I will suddenly be mentally restricting. You know what I mean? There's this whole thing about like the fear of, you cannot think about weight loss or you will head right back into mental restriction. And, you know, even just thinking about it will cause you to binge, which was the mentality that I really kind of had, because it kind of did for a while. And I think that like in the beginning of the process, it is really, that's why I think it is important to do that overcorrection, because you really got to keep it out. You can't heal without that. I really think, for me anyway. And for a lot of people, I just think that you cannot. But then there comes a time where it's like, okay, I can think about this and understand my body's position on it. And also that there's some people who have an overshot where it doesn't end in disorder, right? It's the fear thing. It's like anti-diet almost makes you afraid to think about things or to talk about things, including like fat phobia, right? So like some people say, like, will come into groups of mine and say, I don't even know if I should say this. And then they'll talk about their own internalized fat phobia. And it's kind of like, I'm afraid to say that because it makes me a bad anti-dieter, and it makes me like, I shouldn't be thinking about these things because my values aren't that, but I still find myself thinking, and we're afraid. It's important to be having open conversations about all of these things and to not be afraid of the subject, even if it's not something we're pursuing, or it's not our explicit value anymore, or it's not our explicit goal anymore. It's still something that it's okay to have conversations about.
It's another moralization. Just jumping off on what you're saying there, is another moralization. What people will often say to me, oh, I know I shouldn't be focusing on weight loss. I know I shouldn't be, shouldn't be. And I always go, it's not, there is no you shouldn't. Yeah. There isn't even you shouldn't diet. The question is simply what happens when you do.
Right.
And allowing that to inform your stance. And then, of course, to find other people in a similar sphere that you can talk to about this as you're developing your ideas. But so often when it's presented, it's a new ideology.
Yeah.
Here, take this. And people are in so much pain. They know that dieting is not working. I'm like, okay, I'll take your ideology. It gives me something to put on. It gives me a sense of fellowship and acceptance amongst these other like-minded people, which, of course, you may need. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be part of that community. But where is this ideology coming from? Are you testing it out for yourself and going, yes, this really feels true in my experience, or no, I'm angry about dieting and this is how I should think about it? Because I just I see it as this force for good in so many ways. Right? The anti-diet movement to me comes from such a good place. We're talking about reducing people's shame. It's not your fault that you can't diet. Diet culture tells you should be able to, and that you should eventually get to a place where you can. And you and I are both saying, like, from our perspective, where we are down on our journey, we can't. Like, we can't. I don't feel any guilt or any sense, oh, I shouldn't think about this if I'm having not a particularly good body image day. And like my body feels too big or it feels too heavy. And I have that, oh, I wish it was smaller. And I wonder if that. There's no sense of, oh, I should be thinking this. This isn't helpful. It's just like, well, I am. What are you going to do about it, Sarah? And I'm like, well, and then I realize it's not helpful, but it's a realization as opposed to I'm telling myself it's not.
Right. The other way that could show up, though, is like even the thought of wanting to lose weight is a breach of a value of fat is bad. Right. And so I think that in the beginning, I had that idea that like, if I felt at times like I wanted to lose weight, that was somehow like, oh, that's not okay for me to think, because it's inherently saying that fat is bad. And I don't want, like, that's the other value of the anti-diet movement that I think is wonderful. It advocates for diversity and inclusion, and it is not bad to live in a fat body. People live in fat bodies. That to me is very important. That whole part of anti-diet has changed me. And I have worked with body image long enough to know that it is not just about fat versus thin. It's about safety in the body and trauma in the body. And, for example, I have clients who, when they gain weight, feel like that exposes them in a way that leaves them vulnerable and has been traumatic for them. So the desire to shrink isn't just about looks, or like it's about, I have learned this about being in a bigger body and it has not been safe for me. And that's where that comes from. And that conversation needs to be okay. You know what I mean? Like to feel like you don't need to be ashamed of yourself for thinking about that or desiring weight loss when it comes from a place of safety in the body. The other thing is, I've had clients who we've worked together for a period of time. The client has stopped binging. We've said goodbye, go our separate ways. We keep in touch. But this one client in particular came back to me about a year later and said, I've been afraid to tell you this, but I have been intentionally trying to lose weight. And I, encouraged her not to be afraid to tell me something.
You got rid of her, didn't you? You stopped working with her.
I was like, banished. Get out. Don't talk to me again. No, she did, and she lost a bit of weight, and she wasn't binging anymore, right? And who knows, that could come. And that part of what my like theory is kind of like, well, if you push your body to a certain point, you will bend. There's a rebound effect. It hasn't been 5 years. However, it is not, I don't care. Like, it's not my position to judge if she's been able to lose weight and she's not binging, and that feels good to her. She's allowed to do what she wants to do. Like, it's an autonomous thing. And I have other clients who have said, I've tried to lose weight and I started binging again. And I need I need to have a session just to refresh, sort of. And it's like, okay, now also not my position to judge. Everybody's going to have a different experience. And it's not my job to tell you that you're right or wrong. You know what I mean? It is the independent journey of this. And I can help you navigate that. And I can offer things to help you navigate that. But essentially, if something works for you, then it works, then fine. You know what I mean? Like, it's not okay. Everybody's going to be different on that.
If you would like to come and connect with us in person, we're going to be in Dublin on Saturday, the 16th of September, 2023. We're going to be teaming up with the Intuitive Eating Hub for a workshop, followed by a social at a local Irish pub. We would love to meet you and hope you can join us.
And don't forget, you can still join our community of listeners by signing up on Patreon for access to monthly support calls, an active private Facebook group, and regular Ask Us Anything bonus calls. Links for Dublin and for the community are in the show notes.
For me, there's something in the healing from disordered eating and the self-acceptance and the acceptance of dieting not working or not being able to pursue intentional weight loss, that I think, say this cautiously because I don't want to make this as a sweeping generalization, but I think something that can really help see how far along with your healing you are is how triggered you feel when somebody else loses weight. Because I see this sometimes in the anti-diet community, that there's a big reaction to somebody losing weight. Now, there's a very natural part of this process, which is going to mean this is going to be difficult and it's going to trigger feelings in you, especially when people close to you might lose weight. And it might be that I think you can still be pretty healed and be triggered by that, but it's how you bring yourself down from it. Are you able to come back down to a sense of steadiness in yourself, in your sense of what's okay for you, that it doesn't trigger your shame? Because I think that's going on for some people. You see someone else doing it, and then it threatens your whole belief system about diets doesn't work. Intentional weight loss doesn't work. So you have to make them wrong for what they're doing in order for you not to have your doubts and your shame come up. But why can this person do it and I can't? There's something, I think, in the acceptance of that's really, I think it's really helpful for personal stability, certainly for me, to accept that there are people out there who can pursue intentional weight loss and be quote unquote successful at it.
Yes.
And it's not disordered for them.
Yes. Yes. And I think you're doing a much better job, I think, at saying what I'm trying to say.
I thought you were doing a brilliant job, Steph.
Oh no,
the way you kicked off this episode, I was like, I felt like you'd said it all and I didn't know what I was even going to add. So I just want to add that in there.
Oh, thanks. All right. Because I feel like I'm walking myself into, like, I'm digging myself in a hole. But like, I think what you just articulated is more to my point. I think that it's kind of like, once I found that personal stability of, I really, really understand that I will not be compromising myself for weight loss ever again, no matter what other people are doing, no matter how much I'm triggered. Like, I really feel aligned with myself and I trust myself on that. And once I really felt solid in that, I started to be able to be open to the fact that other people can lose weight, talk about losing weight, and I don't need to be threatened by that. For example, Ben Carpenter I love him, his account, for anyone who follows him, but he talks about, in fact, he recently published a book called Everything Fat Loss. And I was upset about it at first because I was like, wait a minute, he is someone who I really felt aligned with as far as his messaging and his values, like really thought and when I read his book title, I was shocked. It was dissonance for me. I have the book and I have read a bit of it. I haven't been able, it's a big book, but I started potentially my most defensive instinct would have been like, unfollow, don't read, like move away. But when you feel secure enough in where you are that like that's what you're not doing. Like you're not turning him off, running away from that because it's not interrupting my own sense of myself, right? So I think in the beginning of a healing path, you're like a baby deer. You know, you're like, oh, I don't feel steady enough in myself to be able to I know that the being around mentalities like that or thinking about concepts like that might derail me. I'm too vulnerable yet, you know? So I can't. But when you get steady enough on your feet and you really know who you are and what works for, you know, you have that sense of self. And I think that is the key. It's like, or that's a sign of your stability, because it was kind of like, no, I can hear what he has to say and not be threatened by it. It's not going to disrupt what I know to be true for me. You know what I mean? Like I feel solid enough. And I think that that's what happens the longer that and again, some people listening to this episode aren't like, this will not be helpful because it's too early. And I want to make sure we're saying that, like, if none of this feels true to you and you feel like you still really need to like not listen to not have that in your face, then that's for a reason. And I think that again, that's why I read that thread in the beginning. I think that overcorrection is an important part, is a necessary part of pivoting on something, of evolving on something. You've got to reject things and immerse yourself in other things. And then it's not the end of the journey. I think that there's room later for more evolution, which involves being able to tolerate more of that and stay open-minded and all the while stay rooted where you are. Like that is the point of it. I think that's actually, to me, I wasn't expecting that to come around. I expected my life to be anti-diet staunchly. And now I'm kind of like, I don't even want to call it anything because I don't feel threatened by not being anti-diet. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. There was, I don't know if you saw it because I can't remember who it was. And I don't really like, putting stuff out here without being able to credit who it was. But it was such a good analogy that I'm gonna. And they were talking about, I think they were talking about body neutrality and sort of, because somebody was criticizing, like, why are we being proud of our bodies? Like our bodies should just be bodies, and being proud of your body kind of still means you're very identified with the body. And so they were making this argument for neutrality. And this was the rebuttal. It was saying it was like being in shark-infested waters where you're being attacked by sharks, right? You are going to get right out of the water and you're going to get away from that water. Whereas neutrality would be more like standing in the shallow end with your ankles. The shark can't get to you, but it's too close. It's too close. You wouldn't be able to relax ankle deep in shark-infested waters if you're being attacked by sharks, right?
Yeah.
Even though you're perfectly safe there.
Yeah,
so it's this idea. It's the idea of overcorrection, right? You get as far
Mm.
away from the water as you can. Everyone's going, it's okay. Why don't you just stop at the water's edge? And you'll go, no, like I'm in threat. The water's too scary. I need to get way away from it. That's the overcorrection. It's finding enough safety to then go, okay, like I live in a world where there's sharks.
Yeah.
And I come away from this really staunch position way, way, way away and come back to a neutral place.
Yeah.
That's safe enough.
That reminds me too of like just appearance and objectification in general. So I have 3 girls, as you know, and in the beginning of this process, I was full on rejecting like appearance as value. I still do, by the way, but to the point where I never, not one time would ever comment or compliment my daughters on like their hair. I wouldn't call them cute. I wouldn't compliment their clothes, nothing about their appearance. Everything was about their character. Now, do I still believe that? Yes, I do. I want my children to value themselves for their character, not for their looks. But I also started to notice that my oldest daughter was the one who kind of pointed this out to me. She said, Mom, sometimes I just want you to tell me that I look pretty. Or somebody else told her she looked something. She didn't say it like that, but like somebody else told her she looked pretty. And I could tell that like it just made her feel good. And I was like, would it be great to live in a world where that didn't matter? Yes, but it does to many people. So almost in my avoiding saying it, I think she was taking it as a rejection. You know what I mean? I was sitting here so vehemently trying to get her to not value her looks, but she wasn't reading it that way because we live in the world, right? So it's kind of this almost like we have to be able to not be afraid also to say, I think you look beautiful. You know, like that is no longer something I'm afraid to say, because I don't oversay it. It's certainly not the only thing I say. And I'm absolutely talking about their other things, you know, their the traits and who they are way more. But I also am not afraid to say you're beautiful. And in fact, I think it's better for me to say that sometimes than for me to never say it. It's the same sort of idea. And that was an evolution for me to realize what my, like, and also that she was reading that position. Like she could feel the energy around my refusal to say it. I really think, you know, my kids were picking up on the fact that I would never say stuff like that. And almost it was drawing more attention to it. You know what I mean? And that's been something that I've also changed. And so there's something about the energy we're carrying when we're anti something that is actually doing the opposite thing of its intent, number one. And number two, that we are actually then potentially at a certain point over identifying with that. And there's in that process, there's a lack of neutrality that's available. And the goal for me is to have that sort of low energy about all of this stuff. Like that to me is the sign of progress. And of that's my ultimate goal, is to not have the energy around it. Anti-diet still carries some energy, and it should for a while. And to some extent, I still have it. Obviously, I talk about, I passionately podcast about a lot of these values. So I do attach to it in some ways, and I do have energy around it in some ways, but there's a sweet spot, I think. And I think I'm doing better than I used to do at like not staying in that overcorrection. I think that, and it feels really nice. Sometimes, other times I feel like, I think I'm ready to talk about something new.
Oh no, well, sometimes we'll record an episode on something and then we're like, we should really link this to food somehow, because that's what people are listening, or the image. That's what people are listening to us for, right?
Yeah. The other thing that I'll see happening is that anti-diet can take on somewhat of a preaching kind of quality, where anyone who disagrees, like there's this desire to educate others. And sometimes other people just aren't, first of all, sometimes people aren't ready for that, but sometimes they just don't need that. And I think that there was a time where I felt like it was my job to convince the world and my family and anyone else who departed from my thinking on it that I was right, and that really everybody should be thinking this way. And I resented anyone who didn't, and I also wasn't open-minded to anyone who didn't. I basically just assigned them the identity of, you just haven't learned enough yet. You know, like you don't know. And sometimes I still think it.
Yeah.
Like there's still ways that I still do believe that's true. But I also understand where it isn't, and where, for example, I went out to and this is a nuanced topic too, but I went out to dinner with some friends last weekend. And this is a group of friends that I see maybe once a year. And one of the women in the group, in the past years that we've gotten together, she's been one who has said to me, I follow you, and I've been following you, and I really like what you are saying, but I can't get there yet. Like I can't go there yet. And so I know that about her. And then going to this dinner, she was making some comments about her quote unquote like lifestyle. And there was a part of me that was kind of like, she doesn't know enough yet. like, you know, there was a part of me, and I will speak of myself in parts, because there's absolutely parts. But there's another part of me that was like, she's doing fine. Like she's okay, you know, to the degree that I'm aware. Whatever she's doing, she's happy enough with right now. And that's her choice to be there. And I don't have to convince her. I don't have to sit here waiting with bated breath for the time that we get together and she's finally like, I need your help. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need my identity to depend on her doing that. And if she lives the rest of her life like in a middle place where she's not in a disorder where to the point where she's like, I'm exhausted by this, I need to change my life, this is absolutely in my way. And if my sister's the same way, where like there's some diet culture in there, but not enough that it interrupts her life. And you choose that. And that I think is something I'll talk about with clients too, where there's this feeling like we need to convince other people this thing. And if we don't, it almost jeopardizes our own sense of being right. And I think that it's so ironic, because that's essentially what happens on the other side of the coin, where like we need to say dieters might need to say fat is bad because it helps reaffirm their identity that they need to, of what they're doing and their values. So just watching for that and being aware of where we're basically doing the same thing we used to do, just on the other side of the coin. And admittedly, I think the other side of the coin is a bit more, there's more humanity in it. I think there's good stuff in it, which I'd rather be, if I had to choose, I'd rather be identified and obsessed with anti-diet than I would dieting, for sure. I think it's an evolution of its own. But I think the ultimate goal to me has been to get to a place where I'm free to think what I think without needing to tell everyone about it. So I happen to, even though this is my job, but I'm really just here to help, to get people out of the binge eating cycle, and learn to live with their bodies if they so choose. But not that I need to conquer the world domination on that front. I don't need.
But you're creating content. You're putting it out there. You're putting the message out there for people when they're ready to consume it. So they make that choice. And people will come to you with a sense of freedom that they want to read your posts.
Yeah.
If they come and do that. And so you're doing your bit. And people can become very evangelical because it can feel like I've seen the light and everybody else has to see the light as well.
Yeah.
I would just want to say, just keep your own house in order.
Yeah.
Just live it. Live these values. And those around who will benefit from this, they might see and notice, and then they'll come and ask you about it, as opposed to you going, nobody likes to be told, hey, there's this new value. You've been valuing the wrong thing. You need to come and value this thing over here. You've been getting it wrong. There's a defensiveness. We all defend our own beliefs. Whether you're on the anti-diet side or whether you're on the dieting side, you're going to feel defensive of your own beliefs. And when that defensiveness comes down, because it's like, why are you trying to convince everybody? So you've just got everybody going around shouting off about how their way is the right way.
Yeah.
And anybody listening to this episode, if you've listened to it and at times what we've said has been activating or you've had a strong reaction pushing back against it, that's fine. The real evolution of that is to go, okay, do I get enough value from what Sarah and Stef are saying in their podcast that this is
useful? Keep listening.
Only if you're getting value from it. But for you to then listen to us and think that you have to agree with every single thing we say is just this other idea of taking on this ideology of trying to find your identity in other people's belief systems.
Yeah. I also know that I will edit this podcast, listen to the things I said and cringe potentially about how it came out, or the part of me that is, there will be a part of me that hears it in a way that, I don't know, Steph, what, and we're all nuanced. But this is just something we have not talked about on the podcast that I think it, needs to get represented too.
Yeah, because we were thinking of stopping the podcast because we're running out of topics.
No, we're definitely not. But I think that says what we said. I think that's it. Unless you have any other points.
No, but it's been a long time since we've asked for reviews.
Yeah. We would love some reviews. I haven't checked to see if there's reviews, new ones.
I think we need, especially in the UK, we need some. We've not really, we look at the numbers of downloads, it's pretty good. People are not reviewing. So they're either listening and going away, or they're listening and thinking that the reviews don't matter.
Thinking we don't need them anymore.
Yeah, we kind of do. I don't know how else to ask. Please. Please.
Maybe this wasn't the best part.
5 stars. Nice ladies, worth a listen, please. I mean, if you're listening to this episode, your podcast app is open. So if you're in Apple Podcasts, go and rate it. If you're on Spotify, rate it. If you're on any of the others, most of them I don't think you can rate. And we appreciate you just as much as the Apple and Spotify listeners.
We do.
We do.
Thank you all. Thank you.
And you can follow us on Instagram, Life After Diets Podcast. Send us an email. Why don't you? lifeafterdietspodcast@gmail.com. We haven't done this for so long. I don't know why I've got such a massive grin on my face when I'm saying it.
I was going to also say that we're going to be in Dublin, but maybe we stick to one thing at a time. In a few weeks.
Yes.
A few weeks.
Yes, when this comes out. Yeah.
It'll be a few weeks away. So if you're last minute or still time to grab your
September,
ticket.
Dublin.
Just go to Dublin for a weekend.
Come join us.
If you're already there, just come on over.
Come join us. Come have an Irish jiggles. Okay.
Take that.